Your son will receive nothing from my estate. Not the patents, not the company shares, not the $14 million in assets I've accumulated. I told my former in-laws calmly as their lawyer read through my ex-husband's bankruptcy filing. Their faces went from smug satisfaction to horror as they realized the document I'd signed 5 years ago. Waiving rights to their son's inheritance. Went both ways, and the penniless woman they'd accused of gold digging had built an empire, while their trust fund baby squandered everything. What they didn't know was that I'd planned this moment from the day they'd humiliated me in their mahogany-paneled study, demanding I prove my love wasn't about money. It started at a garden party in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind where women wore hats unironically and men discussed yacht maintenance over gin and tonics. I was there as Thomas Hartwell's girlfriend, still adjusting to a world where people had summer homes and trusted funds were discussed like weather patterns. She's pretty, I heard his mother, Eleanor Hartwell, tell someone. But pretty is easy to buy these days. I was standing right there, holding a glass of champagne I was afraid to sip because I wasn't sure which fork to use if they served food. Thomas had wandered off to talk polo with his prep school friends, leaving me adrift in a sea of old money and older grudges. "Mom," Thomas said when he returned, "you've met Luna, right?" Eleanor's smile could have frozen hell. "Of course. The waitress." "Bartender," I corrected quietly. "And part-time chemistry tutor." "How industrious." She made it sound like a disease. I should have run then. But Thomas was charming in that careless way of people who'd never worried about anything real. He pursued me with flowers and promises, painting a picture of a life where love conquered tax brackets. "They'll warm up to you," he assured me after another brutal family dinner where his father, Harrison, interrogated me about my prospects, and his sister Celia asked if community college was like real college, but easier. They didn't warm up. They iced over. The engagement announcement triggered a family meeting I wasn't invited to. Thomas came back pale and shaken. "They want you to sign something," he said. "A prenup. It's standard in our family." But when I read the document their lawyer presented, it went far beyond standard. It wasn't just about protecting existing Hartwell assets. It included clauses about future inheritances, trust distributions, even gift limits between spouses. "This essentially says I get nothing if we divorce, regardless of length of marriage or circumstances," I pointed out. "That's the point," Eleanor said coolly. "We need to protect Thomas from ambitious individuals. You think I'm a gold digger. I think you're a smart girl who recognizes an opportunity." Harrison's voice was pure condescension. "There's no shame in social climbing, but we won't subsidize it." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, but didn't defend me. That should have been my second warning. "Fine," I heard myself say. "But I want an addition to the agreement." Their lawyer looked intrigued. "What kind of addition?" "A mutual waiver of inheritance rights. I won't claim any part of Thomas's inheritance, and he can't claim any part of mine." Eleanor actually laughed. "Your inheritance? Dear, we've done our research. Your father drives a truck and your mother cleans houses. What inheritance could you possibly have?" "Future assets," I said evenly. "If you're so concerned about protecting wealth, it should work both ways." "Ridiculous," Harrison scoffed. "But if it makes you feel important, add it. Thomas, this proves she's after money. She's already fantasizing about wealth she'll never have." The lawyer added the clause. I signed. They witnessed. Everyone seemed satisfied. The Hartwells because they'd protected their precious heir from the grasping lower classes, and me because I'd maintained some dignity in the face of their contempt. The wedding was a Hartwell production. 500 guests I didn't know, a reception at their country club, and Eleanor telling everyone how charitable Thomas was for marrying below his station. My family was seated so far from the head table they needed binoculars to see us. "Welcome to the family," Celia said during the reception, air-kissing my cheek. "Try not to embarrass us too much." Married life was educational. Thomas didn't work because investing is a full-time job, which meant day trading with his trust fund money and losing spectacularly. I kept bartending, despite Eleanor's horror at having service industry associated with the Hartwell name. "Why do you insist on that degrading job?" she demanded during one of her mandatory weekly lunches where she critiqued everything from my nail polish to my pronunciation. "Because I have student loans and rent. Thomas should be providing for you." "With what?" "His trust fund pays out $3,000 a month. Our apartment costs $2,800. Then live somewhere more, appropriate to your means." "You mean cheaper?" "I mean realistic about your position." But I wasn't interested in being realistic. I was interested in revenge. Not the hot kind that burns everything down, but the cold kind that builds something better from spite. I'd always been good at chemistry, hence the tutoring job. But bartending had taught me about people, about sales, about what made customers come back. Combine the two, and you had something interesting. I started experimenting in our tiny apartment kitchen, much to Thomas's annoyance. "What's that smell?" he'd complain, not looking up from his phone where he was losing another 1,000 on crypto. "I'm developing a new kind of hangover cure. Natural ingredients, scientifically formulated." "Why?" "Just buy Advil like normal people." But normal people weren't my target market. Rich people who drank too much at charity galas and board meetings. They'd pay premium for something that actually worked, that was discreet, that came in elegant packaging. I maxed out credit cards Eleanor didn't know I had. Worked 20-hour days she'd never hear about. Filed patents under my maiden name she'd never bother to check. Luna's little project. Thomas called it when his friends asked about the boxes of supplies in our apartment. "Let her have her hobby," Eleanor advised him. "It keeps her busy while you focus on important things." The important things Thomas focused on included a cocaine habit, 2 affairs I pretended not to know about, and investment strategies that turned trust fund money into tax write-offs. Within 3 years, he'd burned through his accessible funds and started eyeing the principal his grandparents had locked away until he turned 40. Meanwhile, Lunar Labs, my hobby, had evolved from kitchen chemistry to a legitimate business. The hangover cure was just the beginning. I developed a line of wellness shots for the spa set, energy supplements for Wall Street warriors, recovery drinks for weekend athletes who thought expensive equipment made up for poor conditioning. Everything was marketed as exclusive, sold through high-end boutiques and private clubs. The Hartwell name opened doors I never could have accessed as Luna Reeves, bartender. I just had to stomach the irony of using their connections while they sneered at my ambitions. "It's adorable that you're playing businesswoman," Celia said at one family dinner. "But when are you going to give Thomas children? That's your real job now." "When Thomas can afford them," I replied sweetly. The table went silent. We all knew Thomas's financial situation, though no one acknowledged it. Trust fund babies didn't fail, they just had temporary setbacks, or were exploring options. Year 4 was when Thomas started getting desperate. His parents had cut off the extra funds they'd been sliding him under the table. His investment account looked like a heart monitor flatlining. And suddenly, his wife's little project was generating real money. "We should talk about combining our finances," he suggested one night. "Married people share everything, right? We have a prenup, remember? Your parents were very specific about keeping finances separate." "That was to protect me from you," he laughed nervously. "Not the other way around. Funny how protection only matters when it flows one direction." He started paying attention to my business then. Asking questions about revenue, about growth projections, about why I was meeting with venture capitalists. "I could help," he offered. "I have experience with investments." "You have experience with losing investments." "That's not fair." Neither was accusing me of being a gold digger, but here we are. The marriage limped along another year, held together by inertia and Thomas's growing realization that his wife, the nobody his parents had despised, was now worth more than he was. The serving girl had become a CEO while the prince had become a pauper. The divorce was his idea, though he'd deny it later. "We've grown apart," he said, which was true. I'd grown up and he'd grown desperate. "I want alimony," he announced through his lawyer. "Luna built her business during our marriage. I'm entitled to half." That's when I played my card. The mutual waiver his parents had laughed at, the clause they'd thought was meaningless because what could a truck driver's daughter possibly inherit? "Your client waived all rights to his spouse's assets," my lawyer reminded them. "Current and future. It's ironclad." Thomas's lawyer tried everything. Claimed I'd hidden assets. I hadn't. Everything was meticulously documented. Claimed the business was built on Hartwell connections. Connections aren't community property. Claimed the prenup was signed under duress. Hard to prove when his parents had practically celebrated it. The divorce went through. Thomas got nothing from me. I got nothing from him, which, given his negative net worth, was actually a gift. That should have been the end. But the Hartwells couldn't let it go. Eleanor spread rumors that I'd somehow tricked her son. Harrison threatened vague legal action. Celia told anyone who'd listen that I was a climber who got lucky. Then, 6 months after the divorce, Karma arrived in a Hermes suit. Thomas's grandfather died. The trust that had been locked until Thomas turned 40? It had a morality clause. Divorce was fine, but drug use and financial mismanagement? Those were disqualifiers. The estate went to charity. Thomas got nothing. Worse, without the promise of future inheritance, Thomas's creditors came calling. The apartment, the car, the watch collection, everything liquidated. He declared bankruptcy within 3 months. Which is how I ended up in a conference room with the Hartwells, their lawyer reading through Thomas's list of assets and debts. They'd asked me to come, hoping I'd feel guilty enough to help their son despite everything. Your son will receive nothing from my estate, I said when they finished their plea. Not the patents, not the company's shares, not the 14 million in assets I've accumulated. Eleanor's face went white. 14 million? Current valuation. We're in talks for acquisition that would triple that, but I'm holding out for better terms. You did this on purpose, Harrison sputtered. You planned this from the beginning. No, I planned to love your son. You planned to humiliate me. The prenup was your idea, remember? I just insisted on reciprocity. But he's desperate, Eleanor pleaded. He's living in a studio apartment in Queens. He's working retail. Honest work, I said. Nothing to be ashamed of. Unless you think some people are too good for certain jobs. They had no response to that. Here's what I don't understand, I continued. You raised him to believe he was superior because of his last name and bank account. You taught him that people like me existed to serve people like him. Then you're surprised when he can't function without money? When he has no skills beyond spending. We gave him every advantage, Harrison protested. You gave him every privilege. There's a difference. Advantages are tools you use to build something. Privileges are cushions that make you soft. Celia hadn't spoken the entire meeting. Now she asked quietly, would you have helped him if we'd been kind to you? I considered the question. Maybe. Probably. I'm not naturally cruel. But you taught me that money was the only measure of worth. So I measured myself. Turns out, I'm worth quite a lot. I stood to leave. Thomas knows how to reach me if he needs legitimate help. A job reference, maybe. I hear he's punctual and his retail manager says he's learning humility. But money? No. That door closed when you slammed it in my face. This is revenge, Eleanor said. This is consequences, I corrected. You wanted to protect your money from me. Congratulations, it worked. Your money is completely safe from me. And mine is completely safe from you. I left them in that conference room with their lawyers and their shock and their son's bankruptcy papers. The elevator down felt like ascending, weightless, free, victorious. My phone buzzed with a text from my CFO about the acquisition offer. The number was astronomical, the kind of wealth that would make even the Hartwells take notice. Old money meeting new money, and discovering new money had sharper teeth. But I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about Thomas, folding shirts at a department store, finally learning what work actually meant. About Eleanor, discovering that the nobody she'd dismissed now had the power to save or sink her son. About Harrison, understanding too late that breeding and bank accounts were poor substitutes for character and capability. They'd made me sign away my rights to their money, so afraid I'd take something I hadn't earned. Instead, I'd earned something they couldn't take. The gold digger who had struck gold anyway. And the family who'd protected their fortune so carefully had lost something worth more. The chance to have someone in their corner who'd climbed up from nothing and knew how to climb again. But they'd taught me well. In their world, you protected what was yours. So I did.